It was supposed to be a routine federal hearing. Flashing cameras, stern faces, and murmurs in the gallery. Reporters from every major outlet lined the back wall. But what no one expected that crisp morning in Washington, D.C., was the unspoken storm walking in behind closed doors. Vice President J.D. Vance sat quietly in the third row, his hands clasped, jaw set, eyes fixed not on the bench, but on Hunter Biden. America had watched them trade jabs in the press, but this was different. This was personal. The president's son stood trial, battling charges that weighed heavily not just on him, but on the entire Biden legacy. People whispered, "Why is JD here?" He wasn't subpoenaed. He wasn't testifying. But he was there for a reason. And just minutes into opening statements, something in Vance's expression shifted. A deep sadness, maybe regret, maybe something older. And then, in a move that broke every rule of courtroom protocol, J.D. Vance rose slowly from his seat. The judge looked up sharply. Gasps filled the courtroom. And just like that, everything changed. The courtroom froze. All eyes locked on J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, now standing, silent, against the roar of confusion around him. Even the bailiff hesitated. This wasn't part of the schedule. The attorneys exchanged puzzled looks. The judge raised a brow, about to speak, but something about J.D.'s face stopped him. Hunter Biden turned slowly. The two men, once political enemies, now faced each other in a moment heavier than anything the cameras could capture. J.D. spoke, but not to the judge, not to the cameras. He looked straight at Hunter. His voice was low, steady. "I know what it's like, to lose yourself trying to fix something that already broke you." The words cut through the room like a blade. Hunter blinked, confused. J.D. took a slow breath, his voice trembling now. "I was 11 when I found my mom on the bathroom floor," he said. "Pills everywhere. I thought she was asleep." A sharp breath from the jury. The judge lowered his gavel. And still, J.D. continued. "We hide pain behind politics," he said softly. "But sometimes, the pain finds its way out, no matter who you are." The courtroom was dead quiet. Even the most hardened journalists lowered their cameras. Hunter Biden stood frozen. His expression wasn't one of defense, but of recognition. Something in J.D.'s words had pierced deeper than the courtroom walls. "I hated her for a long time," J.D. whispered. "My mother. For choosing the needle over me. For disappearing while I stayed behind in Middletown, learning how to cook dinner at 8, how to pretend I wasn't broken." He looked at Hunter now, not like a rival, but like someone standing across a mirror. "I saw the videos, I saw the addiction. And you know what I saw? Not shame, not scandal. I saw a son, still trying to forgive himself." Hunter's eyes welled. For once, he didn't care who was watching. J.D. took a step closer. "I didn't come here to shame you. I came here because I know how heavy it gets when the world only sees your worst day." Even the judge's lips tightened, holding back tears. "I'm not excusing anything," J.D. said. "But I've learned that healing begins the moment someone says, 'I get it.' So, I'm saying it now." And in that moment, enemies became human. J.D. Vance wasn't supposed to speak. Courtrooms don't work like that, especially not when you're the sitting Vice President of the United States. But he didn't care about optics, not today. He wasn't here as a politician. He was here as a son. "I was 16 when I buried her," J.D. said, voice cracking for the first time. "Closed casket. I couldn't even look at her face." The room tightened. He continued. "I remember thinking, did I not love her enough to make her stop? I carried that guilt for years. Still do." Hunter stared at him now, not blinking. J.D. took a deep breath. "And when I saw your name in the news, the mistakes, the drugs, the loss, I didn't see corruption. I saw grief. I saw someone drowning the same way I nearly did. The judge looked down, wiping his glasses, and that's when JD's voice dropped to a whisper. We are more than our worst mistakes. You're still a father, still a son. His hands trembled. You still have time to be better. No one moved, not even the cameras. JD reached into his inside pocket and pulled out something worn, folded 4 times. He held it up, careful, like it might break. This, he said softly, is the letter I wrote to my mom, 10 years after she died. The courtroom was still. Even the prosecutor stopped flipping pages. JD unfolded the paper slowly. I was angry when I wrote it, angry at what she became, but mostly, I was angry that she left me without answers. He looked down, then read aloud. I forgive you. Not because I'm okay, but because I need to be. I forgive you for missing my graduation, for not seeing me get married, for leaving me with questions no one else could answer. I forgive you because I finally understand. You were hurting too. JD looked up, eyes misty. I never mailed it. There was nowhere to send it. But writing it saved me. He turned to Hunter. I don't know what guilt you carry, but I promise you forgiving yourself is the first step home. A sniffle echoed from the gallery, then another. And suddenly, the room wasn't watching a trial. They were watching healing. Hunter's hands shook. He reached into his coat, almost on instinct, and pulled out a folded photograph. He looked at it, then held it up, his voice barely audible. This is me and my brother, Bo, before everything. The name alone shifted the room. Bo Biden, the soldier, the hope, the one they lost. JD stepped closer softly. I remember Bo, he said. He visited a VA clinic in Ohio. Talked to vets like they mattered. He looked me in the eye. Hunter nodded. He believed in people. And so do you, JD said. Or you wouldn't be standing here fighting. Tears streamed down Hunter's face. I failed him, he whispered. I failed everyone. JD paused, then gently said, No, you didn't. You're still standing. That's enough for today. Even the court reporter stopped typing, her hands trembling. For the first time, Hunter wasn't a political target. He was a man, a grieving brother, a broken son. And standing across from him was another man, once a critic, who now offered something deeper than mercy. He offered understanding, and that made even the judge lower his gaze in silence. JD Vance stepped back, his voice now quieter. My childhood wasn't lived in rooms like this. It was lived in basements, dark, cold, and filled with yelling. The courtroom listened like it was a church. My grandfather drank himself into rage. My grandmother smoked through every fight. Some nights I'd hide behind the furnace with my sister and pretend we were invisible. He looked around the courtroom, dignitaries, journalists, lawyers, and smiled bitterly. People assume I made it out because I was smart. Truth is, I just survived long enough to get lucky. He turned back to Hunter. You've survived too. And survival? That's not weakness. Hunter stared, lips trembling. JD added, You ever sit alone in a hotel bathroom at 2 a.m., staring at a bottle and wondering if the world would be better without you? Hunter's silence was louder than any answer. JD nodded. I have. And I know what it feels like when the pain won't leave. The judge's hands were clasped tightly now, knuckles white. This wasn't politics anymore. It was memory. Raw, unfiltered, and real. And for the first time, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom. It felt like confession. JD paused. His eyes drifted to the floor, like he was staring into a memory only he could see. It was the week before Christmas, he said. I was 24. My phone rang while I was on a Greyhound bus heading home. It was my aunt. He took a breath, heavy. She said my cousin Luke had overdosed. Fentanyl. Dead in a gas station bathroom. JD blinked slowly, fighting the sting behind his eyes. I sat on that bus in silence, surrounded by strangers. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I'd already buried too many like him. Too many that looked like me. Hunter swallowed hard. His hand gripped the edge of the defendant's table. JD's voice cracked just once. I used to ask myself, why him and not me? He looked up, gaze sharp and soft all at once. Do you ask yourself that about Bo? Hunter's eyes widened. His breath caught. The silence after that question was so thick it felt like the whole world stopped breathing. JD's voice was barely a whisper now. Maybe you lived, because you still have something left to do. For a moment, it seemed like even the walls were listening. The judge, an old, no-nonsense man known for tough rulings, sat back, glasses lowered, his mouth parted slightly. He looked like he was trying to remember how to breathe. Then, slowly, he cleared his throat. Vice President Vance, he said, voice unsteady, you are not required, nor permitted, to testify today. JD nodded once. I understand, Your Honor. But the judge didn't stop there. He looked at Hunter, then back at JD, then back to the courtroom. I've presided over criminal court for 31 years, the judge said softly, and I have never, in all that time, seen a moment like this. The bailiff looked stunned. Reporters had put down their pens. Even the court artist had tears on her cheek. Then the judge did something no one expected. He stood, and he said, let it be known that this courtroom, for once, did not just witness law, but humanity. A long pause. Sometimes, that's the greater justice. Gasps echoed. No ruling, no verdict, just a room filled with the sound of something rare. Hope. J.D. Vance stepped away from the witness stand, but he didn't sit. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded, creased piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. I wasn't planning to read this today, he said, but something's telling me it's time. He unfolded it gently. This is a letter I wrote 17 years ago to my mom, when I thought she might die from an overdose. The room froze. My mom never got this letter. I was too angry, too ashamed. I was 19. She'd just been arrested again. I was sleeping in my car. His voice was steady, but something behind it cracked. Dear Mom, he read, I love you. I forgive you. Even when you forget to forgive yourself, please don't leave me. I need you, even when I pretend I don't. He folded the letter back. I never gave it to her, but I read it to myself, every time I think about judging someone else's addiction. He looked at Hunter. Today, I'm reading it to you. There were tears in the crowd, but Hunter wasn't just crying. He was shaking, because someone, finally, understood. Hunter lowered his head. He whispered something under his breath. J.D. leaned in slightly. What was that? The judge asked softly. Hunter's voice was barely audible, but it carried. I used to write Bo letters after he died. The room gasped. J.D. didn't blink. He just nodded. I lost someone too, J.D. said. His name was Tommy, my best friend since 3rd grade. Afghanistan took him. Not a bullet, not an explosion. Just the silence afterward. He paused. After the funeral, I sat in my car for 5 hours. I wrote him a letter too, about how I wish I'd answered his last text. A hush covered the courtroom like fog. I still keep it in my Bible, J.D. said. Sometimes I read it when I need to remember that grief is just love with nowhere to go. Hunter's chin quivered. J.D. took a single step closer. You lost Bo, but you didn't lose everything. You're still here, and the world still needs something from you. Hunter didn't speak. He just stared. And for the first time since the trial began, he didn't look like the president's son. He looked like someone's little brother. The judge finally exhaled. A single tear slipped down his cheek. The entire courtroom sat still, breathless. Then, the judge did something almost no one had ever seen him do. He reached for his gavel, then stopped. He removed his glasses, wiped his eyes, and looked at J.D. "Vice President Vance," he said softly, "you just turned this courtroom into something sacred." J.D. offered a humble nod. Then, quietly, the judge tapped the bench once with his knuckle, instead of the gavel. That single tap echoed louder than any verdict. Suddenly, a journalist in the back stood up, forgetting they were in court, and whispered, "This is history." But J.D. wasn't done. He turned toward Hunter again and spoke, this time not from a place of politics but purpose. "You've still got time, Hunter. Don't waste it hiding from pain. Use it." Hunter covered his face. He was crying fully now. The entire nation was watching this moment. A courtroom meant for judgment turned into a place of grace. And somewhere, somehow, millions of Americans watching on TV were crying too. Because pain had met truth, and truth had spoken with love. Just when the courtroom seemed to settle, the unexpected happened. A White House aide entered through the side door, breathless, holding an envelope. "Your Honor," the aide said respectfully, "I've been asked to deliver this. It's from First Lady Jill Biden. It's, for the court." Murmurs spread like wildfire. The judge, stunned, took the envelope and opened it. He scanned the page briefly, then looked at J.D. Vance. "She says it's addressed to both of you," he said, handing it to the vice president. J.D. unfolded the letter and read aloud. "Dear J.D. and Hunter, this is not a political message. It's a mother's. There are no cameras in a mother's heart, no voters, just grief and hope." The room was silent again. "I've watched both of you carry pain in different ways. J.D., your story gave me hope when my son Beau was dying. And Hunter, my son, I still believe in the man who painted in silence when no one else believed in him." J.D. stopped. His voice broke. Even the prosecutors lowered their eyes. This wasn't about a trial anymore. This was a letter written in love, landing in a room built for judgment. J.D. folded Jill Biden's letter slowly, as if afraid to crease something sacred. Then he turned to the courtroom. "You know," J.D. said softly, "I used to tell people my father wasn't a real man. He drank too much, hit too hard, left too soon." He paused. "But when I became a father, I realized he didn't leave. Not really. He stayed in every fear I had of messing up. Every time I raised my voice, every time I looked in the mirror and saw his eyes in mine." Hunter was listening, but not just with his ears. J.D. stepped closer. "Hunter, I know you've made mistakes, but I also know what it feels like to think your last name is the only reason people want you around, or want you gone." He looked directly at him. "Don't let shame be louder than your second chance." The silence was louder than applause. Even the court reporter paused, typing, her fingers trembling. Two men, both sons, both fathers, and for one terrifying, beautiful moment, they weren't divided by politics or cameras. They were united by something older than power, pain, and maybe, just maybe, the will to heal. The judge asked if the defense or prosecution had anything else to add. Before either could speak, Hunter stood, shakily. "I do," he said, surprising everyone. He turned to J.D. "Would you pray with me?" Gasps swept through the room. J.D. blinked, then nodded gently. They walked to the center of the courtroom. Two powerful names, now just two men. Hunter reached out. JD took his hand. And then, Vice President JD Vance closed his eyes and whispered, "God, we're just sons. We're broken, and we don't know what healing looks like anymore. But if you're listening, help us remember who we are, not what the headlines say we are. Help us forgive what still haunts us, and help this country see that mercy is still possible." By the time he finished, the courtroom was completely silent, except for quiet sobs. The judge wiped his eyes. So did a camera operator. And in homes across America, people watching fell to tears. Because in that courtroom, built for punishment, they witnessed something far more powerful. They saw redemption. And it looked like two men, once enemies, now holding on to something greater than politics. The courtroom held its breath as the judge returned from chambers. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Hunter Biden stood. So did J.D. Vance. The judge's voice was calm, but his eyes were still red. "This has been unlike any proceeding I've ever presided over," he began. "We came here expecting arguments, not healing." He looked directly at J.D. "And while your actions broke protocol, they restored something this courtroom forgot: dignity." Then, with a solemn breath, he turned to Hunter. "Mr. Biden, the jury has reached a verdict." The room braced. "On the count of illegal possession of a firearm, we find the defendant guilty." Gasps. Silence. Hunter bowed his head. But J.D. didn't look away. Instead, he walked over. Not as vice president, not as a politician, but as a man. He placed a hand gently on Hunter's shoulder. "You're not done," J.D. whispered. "Don't let this be your last chapter." No cameras caught that line, but every heart in that courtroom felt it, because in that moment, accountability didn't feel like revenge. It felt like grace. President Joe Biden was watching from a private room in the White House. No aides, no cameras, just the father of the man on trial, staring at a screen. He saw J.D. place his hand on Hunter's shoulder. He saw his son cry, not in shame, but in release. And then something cracked inside the president. Not from weakness, from memory, from the echo of Beau's voice, from the image of young Hunter running through the halls with his brother, from years of headlines that never once said human. He reached for the remote to turn the TV off, but he couldn't, because J.D. Vance had said something few men ever dared to say to another father's son. "You're not done." Joe whispered to himself, barely audible. "Thank you, J.D." And just like that, the president wasn't the president. He was just a dad hoping his son would find his way, not because of politics, not because of privilege, but because someone finally told him, not what he'd done, but who he still could be. As the courtroom cleared, reporters flooded outside, but J.D. stayed behind. Hunter was sitting alone, wrists trembling. J.D. turned back one final time. "I know what it's like to hate yourself," he said. "But shame can't raise your kids. Only love can." Hunter nodded, tears flowing freely. Then J.D. did something no one expected. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small folded picture, a photo of him and his late mother, before the addiction took her. He placed it on the defense table and whispered, "I lost her to heroin. I blamed her for years. But I realized she didn't need a lecture. She needed someone to believe she could change. I didn't get that chance, but maybe you still can." And then, without a podium, without applause, J.D. Vance walked out, not as a vice president, but as a son who forgave the past so someone else could survive their future. If you felt even 1 ounce of emotion while watching this story unfold, hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but for every person who's ever felt broken and chose to keep going. Comment below. What part hit you the hardest? Was it the letter, the prayer, or that final goodbye? Subscribe if you believe politics needs more heart and humanity, not just headlines. Because what J.D. Vance did in that courtroom wasn't for cameras. It was for the soul of a man and the conscience of a nation.